Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in. So in this episode, I want to talk to you about my CO2 setup for this giant 480 gallon Discus tank. So it required a couple of hacks, I would say, and that I wanted to show with you today. But I think overall it's working pretty fine. I'm going to show you a few products that I'm using and also one that I'm going to be testing out to handle a particular problem. But first, let me show you what it takes for me to provide enough CO2 for a tank of this size. Okay, so basically the way I am using CO2 on this giant tank is I'm using a dedicated filter down there for the distribution of CO2. And this filter is the Polar Aurora Free Media 4-stage external canister filter with 9-watt UV. It has the strength of 625 GPH, and I paid, I believe, $120 for that. So the way this works is this filter sucks up the water from this corner over there, and then I have actually no media in this at all. So I removed all the filters, every filter pads, anything that you usually put in a filter. And the reason for that is I want there to be as much flow as possible, because the CO2 is going to be distributed from the very left all the way to the right as far as possible. So I want it to be there, as little restriction and flow as possible. And then from there, I have a 75-gallon CO2 tank, and this tank, believe it or not, cost me around $400. So that includes the outright purchase of the tank, plus the CO2, and then the delivery. But the good news is this is like a one-time investment. In order to get this tank refilled, it will cost me $25 for the CO2 itself. And then the pickup and delivery of a new bottle is around $40. So I'm looking at $65. And I think I need it maybe once a year at the most, so I'm not sure. But yeah, so this is only a really high initial investment, but after that it should be a lot cheaper. Attached on the top we have a CO2 regulator. This is the Milwaukee Instruments MA957 dual valve CO2 adjustable flow pressure regulator. I paid $84 for that. And then we have the diffuser, and that is kind of the problem that I have. So this is the Nylog G Aquatic Intense Atomic Inline CO2 atomizer diffuser for $40. And the way this works is, so the CO2 comes from here into the diffuser, and inside this diffuser there's a white ceramic disc, and it's very similar to what I have on my shrimp tank. So here you can see, also a white ceramic CO2 diffuser. You see there's big bubbles coming through here, and then they get basically chopped into smaller ones, and that is then distributed into the tank. So the problem here is that the CO2 bubbles, they travel up the filter, and then here I have a spray bar, which I absolutely love because it's the exact same width of the tank. So I have a really nice even distribution. But the problem is that the bubbles, they basically make my tank look like Sprite water or Mountain Dew. So basically, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's bubbles everywhere. So it's really, really cloudy, and it doesn't really look nice. So the only good thing, I guess, about this current setup is I can exactly tell how far the bubbles travel if they make it all the way to the end. So if the diffusion method that I chose using this filter is good enough. But yeah, I can see bubbles. Here, of course, there's a higher concentration, and then I do see bubbles all the way to the end. And so I guess that's good news, knowing that it travels from one end, from of this 8 feet tank to the other. But yeah, the just the look of it is not really nice. And so I basically decided to use a CO2 reactor. And that is what this device is right here. So this reactor is from a company called GLA, or Greenleaf Aquarium. It's the version, they have two different versions with different size connectors, but this one is the 16/22 millimeters or 5/8 inch, which is your regular tubing that you get in most aquarium stores. And basically the way this works is the CO2 will be fed through here. The inline, so the water that comes out of from the tank into the filter and then goes out of the filter, it basically then goes in here. And there you see a tube that forces the CO2 to travel all the way down and then up into the tank. Up into this top of the diffuser and then into the tank. So the idea is that this will help, increase the time the bubbles have in contact with the water to dissolve them even further. But when you look at CO2 reactors online, you see a lot of them using these balls. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be filling up this whole CO2 diffuser with these media balls. And when the water flows through here, it will actually cut these bubbles down even further. So that will make the bubbles even smaller or hopefully completely dissolved. And then when that happens, you shouldn't see any bubbles at all in this tank. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for. Another thing that I want to point out, which I believe is really important, is the tubing. So the tubing that goes from the regulator to then the reactor or diffuser, whatever you use, it needs to be CO2 specific tubing. So in my case, the one I'm using is the JZ-MYXA CO2 proof tubing. I paid $10 for 16 feet. This is what it looks like. And then if you compare that to regular airline tubing, this is airline tubing. It's really, really soft, and this CO2 tubing is really rock hard. So you need, a heat gun or dip it in hot water to soften it so you can slip it onto the reactor and the diffuser. So don't make the mistake using regular airline tubing because it does lead to leakage of CO2, and then you basically just waste a bunch of CO2. So please use specific CO2 tubing. Okay guys, so it's finally installed. So similar to the previous setup, the water comes through here for the intake of the filter, goes out, goes into the intake of the reactor, and then has to make its way all the way through these bubbles, and then the water is sucked through the hose on the bottom up into the tank. And right here we have the part where the CO2 from the 75-gallon tank is being added to. One thing that I noticed that's kind of weird is that this connection is similar to the ones for reverse osmosis. So you basically just pop it in the hose and then secure with a clip. So it's not like connection like this, where it's basically screwed on really tight. So I'm not sure if that is a good design. We'll see. Another tip I want to give you is when I installed it, at first had a flooding. So there's a gasket in here which has to be fit really tightly. And if you don't do that, the water, as long as this spray bar is underwater, the water will continue to go into the bottom of the tank, into the reactor that is leaking. So I basically had to, in a hurry, put this up on top, raise the water level so that the spray bar is out of the water, so that no more water keeps being sucked down. So that was kind of a mess. And but once that is fixed, I noticed that the reactor simply wasn't filling up with water like the first time. So it was just full with air. The water was maybe down here. So the best way to fix that problem is to simply grab the reactor, turn it upside down, and that will get all the air out of the reactor. And then once it's full with water, then you just put it upright, and then that's pretty much it. So no more leaks. Check carefully, and yeah, just going to see how this works. So no more bubbles in the tank that are being displayed. So no more Sprite water, or what it's called. And the addition of CO2 also affects the pH level. So I have a Milwaukee pH reader. So usually at night when the CO2 is off, it climbs all the way up to 7.4, and then during the day it goes down to 7.0. So a lot of people say that when you use a reactor, which is much more efficient in putting CO2 into your tank compared to the diffuser that creates bubbles, it may be necessary to actually lower the amount of CO2 that's being added to the tank because it's simply being used more efficiently using this reactor. So I will have to keep an eye on that. The easiest way for me to do that is, again, look at the pH reader, and also, you know, these little device up here that changes color. If it's green, it's perfect. If it's yellow, it's too much CO2. Right now it's blue because I just started. I just turned it on. So yeah, so I will let you know if there are any problems. Other than that, I think this is a good investment. $99 for this diffuser, and hopefully the plants will grow a lot better, a lot faster, and yeah, thanks guys.